The wind drifted through the pines like whispers of warning as Howard Bennett stood at the edge of his porch, his eyes fixed on the movement by the tree line. The bobcat was back-pacing, slow, deliberate, its fur twitching in short bursts, its body tense like a coiled spring. Howard had seen bobcats plenty of times in his years living alone in the mountains, but never one like this. It didn't act like a predator or even like it was afraid. Instead, it seemed restless, nervous, its paws leaving sharp marks in the damp dirt. Every few steps it would stop and glance at him, those golden eyes locking on his, as if trying to say something he couldn't understand. He took a sip of coffee, the warmth doing nothing to steady the chill crawling. Up his spine, the woods were too quiet this morning. Too still, even the birds seemed to have vanished. He stepped down from the porch, careful on the old steps that creaked under his boots. The bobcat didn't run this time, it only backed up a few. Feet then circled the same patch of ground again and again. Howard frowned, wondering if maybe there was prey caught in a snare or something hurt beneath the brush. He moved closer, and the bobcat hissed low deep in its throat, but didn't flee. Its tail flicked twice before it darted back into the woods. Howard paused, staring after it, wondering why it had waited so long to bolt. Something wasn't right. He could feel it in his bones, and the woods around him seemed to agree, the silence thick and heavy, pressing down like a warning. All morning he tried to shake the feeling, chopping wood, feeding the fire, fixing the porch rail, but every time he glanced toward the trees, he half expected to see those eyes staring back. He told himself it was just nerves, just another animal doing what animals do. But deep down, something else gnawed at him. The bobcat had looked scared, not of him, but of something else. Something bigger when the sun began to set, painting the sky in bruised purples and gold. He felt that same prickle of unease crawl up the back of his neck again. As darkness settled over the mountains, the house seemed to shrink around him, every sound louder than it should have been, the pop of the fire, the wind pressing against. The window panes, the ticking of the old clock that had belonged to his wife before she passed. He sat in his chair staring at the window, unable to focus on his book because he swore he saw movement again. Just beyond the glass, a flicker of pale, light-like reflection or eyes. He turned off the lamp and waited, his heart beating too hard in his chest. The forest outside was a shadowy blur, but then there it was, the faint gleam of eyes, not animal this time, the reflection too steady, too level, like someone standing just at the edge of the clearing watching him. He stood up slowly, the old boards groaning under his weight. The eyes vanished. Swallowed by the dark, he went to the door, hesitated for a moment, then opened it. The cold night air swept in, carrying the sharp scent of pine and damp earth. He listened. The woods were silent, completely still. Then, from somewhere far off, a sound cut through the quiet. A low, mournful cry. It was so faint he thought maybe it was an animal until it came again, higher pitched, thin, and desperate. Not a bobcat, not a coyote. It sounded human. Howard's blood ran cold. He stepped off the porch, his flashlight trembling in his hand, the beam slicing through the mist and shadows. He called out, his voice cracking from disuse. "Hello, anyone out there?" The answer came as another cry, weaker this time, from deeper in the woods. He hesitated for only a second before grabbing his coat and heading toward the sound. The flashlight beam bouncing over roots and rocks, the night pressing close around him. The forest was different at night. The familiar paths seemed twisted foreign, the trees looming like tall, dark figures watching as he passed. The cry came again, faint, almost lost in the wind. "It's all right?" He called, his voice shaking. "I'm coming, hold on." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure who or what he was talking to. He moved through the brush slower now, careful of the uneven ground, until the beam of his flashlight caught movement ahead. Aid. Flash of tawny fur, the bobcat standing on a rock, staring right at him. Its ears flat, its body tense, it let out a sharp yowl, then bounded away into the dark. Howard followed, his breath short, his heart hammering. He didn't know why he trusted the animal, but something told him he should. It led him deeper into the forest until he reached a small clearing, surrounded by old oaks. The ground disturbed, the leaves scattered, and something pale lying near the center. He froze, the shape, small, motionless. His breath caught in his throat. He moved closer, the beam trembling across the form. Not an animal, but a shoe. Then a leg, a child's leg covered in dirt and torn fabric. His stomach dropped. The figure stirred faintly, and he realized it was a girl, no older than 9 or 10. Her face pale, her lips moving weakly. She looked up at him, eyes wide full of terror. "Please help me," she whispered. Then her head fell back, her breath shallow and uneven. Howard's world seemed to tilt for a moment. He looked around the clearing, expecting someone else to appear, but the woods were silent. The bobcat perched on a rock above, watching him, its tail flicking as if waiting. He dropped to his knees beside the girl, his hands shaking as he checked for a pulse. She was alive barely, but something heavy pinned her down. He brushed away the leaves and saw it, a thick branch broken from above, trapping her leg. She whimpered when he tried to lift it. It wouldn't budge. He looked around for leverage for anything that might help, then froze as the sound of a snapping twig echoed from the trees. It was close, too close. He held his breath, listening. Another snap, then another. Slow, deliberate like footsteps. The bobcat hissed, its eyes locked on something beyond the tree line. Howard's pulse pounded in his ears. The girl stirred again, whispering, "Please don't let him find me." And the way she said it made his blood run cold. He turned his flashlight toward the sound, but saw nothing. Just the black wall of trees and the faint fog curling between them. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, standing just beyond the light, waiting for him to look away. He turned back to the girl, gripping her small hand, his mind racing as he whispered, "It's okay, you're safe now, though." Even he didn't believe it, because every instinct in his body screamed that whatever had frightened the bobcat, whatever had driven this child into the forest, was still out there watching, waiting for the right moment to step forward and reveal itself. Howard steadied his breath, his fingers digging into the damp soil as he forced himself to focus. The girl's leg was swelling fast, and she winced with every movement. The broken branch lay heavy across her like the weight of the forest itself. He pressed his shoulder against it, pushing with all the strength his old bones could manage, but it refused to move. Sweat mixed with the cold air dripping down his brow. He paused, panting, the bobcat above him watching with unblinking eyes, the silence of the woods pressing in on all sides like a warning he couldn't read. He turned to the girl, whispering, "Hold on, sweetheart. I'm not leaving you here." She nodded weakly, her eyes darting toward the darkness beyond the trees. Howard scanned the ground, searching for something long enough to use as leverage, and found a thick branch half buried in mud. He jammed it under the fallen log and pressed down with all his weight, grunting with effort, until the log groaned, shifted, and rolled just enough for him to drag her free. She cried out as her leg came loose, but didn't fight him, her small hands clinging to his sleeve. Once she was clear, he knelt beside her, breathing hard, looking down at her leg, twisted, bruised, not broken, but close. He tore a strip from his jacket and tied it around her calf to keep it still. She trembled, not from pain, but from fear, her wide eyes flicking again and again toward the same stretch of darkness behind him, as if expecting something to appear there at any second. He turned the flashlight and swept it through the trees, the beam catching nothing but fog and branches, though he could have sworn he heard something move just out of sight. A faint shuffle of leaves, deliberate, controlled, too slow to be wind. The bobcat hissed again, its fur rising like static, and Howard's heart began to pound faster. The animal wasn't looking at him or the girl. It was staring at something behind him. He spun, the light around fast, catching a glimpse of what looked like a boot before it vanished into shadow. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Who's out there?" he called. The woods gave no answer, only the sound of wind rustling the leaves. The girl whispered, "Don't let him find me, please," her voice trembling with terror. Howard leaned close. Who's trying to find you?" But she only shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. The bobcat growled again, low in its chest, pacing in a small circle like it was trying to shield them. Howard's instincts told him they needed to move. He helped her up, supporting most of her weight as they stumbled through the forest. The flashlight flickering weakly, he could hear the sound again behind them. Slow, steady footsteps matching their pace. The woods felt alive with something unseen and cruel. They moved through thickets and over fallen logs until they reached the narrow ravine where the creek ran shallow, the moonlight glinting off the water like shards of glass. The girl's breathing came in short, pained gasps. He wanted to stop to rest, but every time he paused, he thought he heard breathing behind him. Not animal, not his own. The bobcat stayed near. Always ahead, never behind, as if it refused to turn its back on whatever was following them. Howard whispered to the girl, "We're almost out of the woods. Just hold on a little longer," but she shook her head. "No, he's here," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's here." The sound of movement came again, louder now, snapping twigs, crunching leaves, and this time there was no mistaking it. Someone was following them. Howard turned, shining the light toward the sound, but saw only fog drifting between the trees he felt. The air grew colder, sharp like metal on his tongue, and the forest went still. Even the wind stopped. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. Then a faint whisper carried through the air. "You shouldn't have come out here, old man." The voice low male, calm but wrong, like it came from deep in the earth itself. Howard pulled the girl closer, his mind racing as he looked for any path that would take them out. He spotted a faint trail leading uphill toward his cabin. He half dragged her forward, every step heavy with dread. The flashlight flickered again, threatening to die. The bobcat darted ahead, its glowing eyes flashing through the mist as it led the way. He didn't dare look back, not yet, but he could hear the voice again, closer this time, echoing between the trees. "Where are you going, Howard?" it said, using his name, and that froze him mid-step. He hadn't told the girl. His name hadn't told anyone, and he hadn't seen another soul in weeks. He turned just for a moment, and the beam of his flashlight caught something pale between the trees, a face smooth and wrong, eyes wide without light, the mouth twisted into something like a smile. Then it was gone. Swallowed by the dark, he forced himself to move faster, the girl clinging. To his coat, the path steep and slick with mud, his boots slipping, but he didn't stop. He couldn't behind him. The sound of footsteps turned into a slow, dragging noise, like something being pulled through leaves heavy and wet. The hill leveled. Out into a clearing just below his cabin, the light from his porch faint through the fog. The sight gave him a burst of strength. He almost laughed with relief until he realized the bobcat had stopped. It stood perfectly still at the edge of the clearing, its head turned toward the woods, its body rigid, its tail twitching, the low rumble in its chest breaking the silence. Howard followed its gaze and saw the figure again stepping out from behind a tree, tall, thin, moving strangely its limbs. Jerking like a puppet, half-controlled, the girl hid her face against his shoulder. Trembling, he raised the flashlight, but the bulb finally flickered out, plunging them into blackness. Howard could hear the thing moving closer, the crunch of each step. Deliberate and unhurried, he fumbled for the matches in his pocket, trying to relight the lantern he carried, but his hands shook too much. The bobcat snarled loud, fierce, then lunged into the dark, the sound of struggle echoing the hiss, the growl. The crack of branches, then silence thick and absolute. The girl clung tighter, whispering, "Is it gone?" He didn't answer. He didn't know. He reached for her hand again, ready to run the moment he heard another sound. But what came next wasn't movement. It was breathing right beside him, slow, steady, close enough to feel on his neck. Howard froze, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. The breathing was real, warm, damp, too close. He turned fast, swinging the dead flashlight through the dark, and felt it connect with something solid. A grunt followed by the sound of something stumbling back. He grabbed the girl, pulling her toward the faint glow of the cabin light ahead. "Run!" He rasped, his voice breaking from the cold air. They stumbled over roots and rocks, the ground slick with dew. The bobcat appeared again from the fog, limping but alive, its fur streaked with dirt, its golden eyes glowing fierce. It darted ahead, clearing a path, its movements fast, deliberate, like it knew exactly where they needed to go. Howard followed its lead, gripping the girl's hand as tight as he could. Behind them came the sound again. Not footsteps now, but dragging, scraping, as if something heavy was crawling through the leaves. The girl whimpered, her voice trembling. "He's still coming?" Howard didn't answer. He didn't dare speak. He could see his porch through the thinning mist, almost there, almost safe. But then the sound changed, turned sharper. Faster, the drag becoming steps again, quick, uneven, closing the distance he risked. One look back and saw a figure moving between the trees. Tall, but twisted its arms, hanging too long, its head tilting to one side like it couldn't hold it straight. The beam of moonlight touched its face for a second, pale skin stretched tight over bone. The eyes dark holes that seemed to pull the light in. Howard shoved the girl up the steps, yelling, "Get inside now!" She pushed the door open and he followed, slamming it shut behind. Them! He locked the latch and stepped back. His chest heaving. The cabin was dark except for the dim flicker of the dying fire. The sound outside stopped for a heartbeat. Only the creak of the old wood filled the silence. Then came a slow knock. Soft, almost polite like a question. Howard's hands trembled on the rifle mounted above the fireplace. He hadn't touched it in years, but now it felt like the only thing keeping him from breaking. He reached up, pulled it down, the metal cold against his palm. He turned toward the door as the knock came again, louder. The girl was sitting on the floor near the hearth, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. He whispered, "Stay back." She nodded, though her gaze never left the door. Howard stepped closer, his breath shallow. "Who's there?" He called, his voice shaking more than he wanted it to. The answer came low and rough from the other side of the wood. "Let me in, old man. You can't keep her from me." His blood turned to ice. The voice was the same one he had heard in the woods, the same calm, wrong tone that made his stomach twist. He backed away, keeping the gun steady though his hands trembled. The bobcat paced near the window, growling deep in its throat. The air in the room seemed to tighten, the shadows stretching along the walls. The fire sputtered, flickered, then went out, plunging them into near darkness. Only the faint silver of moonlight seeping through the curtains remained. The door rattled as something pressed against. Its slow, deliberate, then stopped silence thick enough to choke on filled the room. Howard could hear only the pounding of his own heart. Then came a whisper right by the window, the glass fogging slightly with each word. "She doesn't belong to you." "Howard!" The girl gasped and clutched his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. He turned the rifle toward the sound and saw a face pressed against the glass, pale eyes, gleaming wide lips stretched into a grin before melting back into shadow. The bobcat hissed, leaping onto the windowsill, fur raised, every muscle coiled ready. Howard felt a sudden surge of energy. Not courage exactly, but something primal that refused to let this thing win. He grabbed a lantern from the table, struck a match. The flame flared bright, pushing the shadows back, and for a moment he saw the figure outside, fully standing at the edge of the porch, its body shaking, its head jerking from side to side like it was fighting itself. Howard fired through the glass, the sound thunderous in the small cabin, the recoil knocking him back. The light from the lantern flickered. The girl screamed, the bobcat hissed, then all went silent again. No movement, no sound outside, just the echo of the shot bouncing off the trees. He lay there for a moment, panting, staring at the broken window, smoke curling from the barrel, then slowly stood checking the girl. She was crying quietly, but unhurt. He turned toward the window again. The figure was gone. He approached slowly, every step cautious, his heart thudding in his chest. He leaned out through the shattered frame, the cold air biting at his skin. The porch was empty. The snow glittered under the moonlight, but there were no footprints, not a single mark, only the stillness of the woods pressing back at him. He closed the window with shaking hands, blocking the night out once more. The girl spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not gone. He never goes. He follows people, he finds them, and then he makes them forget, until it's too late." Howard looked at her, confused. "What do you mean, forget?" She didn't answer, only stared at the bobcat, which was now sitting by the door. Calm again, its golden eyes reflecting the lantern light like small suns. Howard felt a chill crawl down his spine. The girl whispered again, "He doesn't come for everyone, only the ones who hear him first." The room felt smaller, darker, the walls creaking as if listening. Howard loaded another round into the rifle, his hands steadier. Now he didn't know what the thing outside was, didn't want to believe in anything beyond the world he knew, But the forest had gone quiet again, and deep inside, he understood it wasn't over. He glanced at the bobcat, who seemed to nod slightly, before turning its gaze toward the door as if waiting for what would come next. The night stretched long and heavy around them, each second thick with silence until far off beyond the trees, the same calm voice called again, softer now, almost tender. "You can't hide forever. Howard, you already know how this ends." Howard stood frozen, his breath shallow, his body rigid. The voice drifted through the night, like smoke curling under the door, wrapping around his thoughts until it felt like it was whispering. Inside his skull, he tightened his grip on the rifle, but his hands were slick with sweat. The girl clung to his sleeve, trembling, silent tears streaking her face. The bobcat had gone completely still, its ears twitching toward the sound. The world outside was too quiet. Even the wind refused to move. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. Howard forced himself to speak, though his throat burned. "Who are you? What do you want?" His voice came out rough-cracked. From fear, the voice outside chuckled. Low, deep, almost kind. "You already know, old man. You saw it too the night your wife went missing." Howard's chest seized up, his mind spinning. That was years ago, he whispered. But the memories flooded back the night.